We ask, Father, that as we study, as we pray together, that you would help us to be mindful of the seasons of life, glorifying you for the work of our Savior, the one who came to take away our sin, not cover it as in past sacrifices, but to give us new life. We ask, Father, that you would help us to tell forth that word as we witness to those around us in this time of uncertainty, that there is a Savior and there is some continuity that goes on through history and it's through our Lord Jesus. We thank you for what you provide. In His great name we pray. Amen. Spark, we're going to let you the rest of the time. Thank you, Linda.
It is good to be here, and it's good to be able to come and share what God's doing in the Congo. And so as usual tonight, I've got pictures of the trip. I'll be explaining kind of how the trip went, explaining some of the pictures. If you're not, I'll try to stick close to here, so if you're not in a good place to see, no one's going to be offended if you change seats here. But again, as normal, it's informal, so if you have a question, a lot of times it's easier to answer the question while I'm on the topic and the picture is up there like, hey, 6 pictures ago there was this weird fruit, what was that? You know, it's kind of hard sometimes to flip backwards. So if there's something you want to know or something you want to ask, just throw your hand up, and if I don't see you, just throw something at me so that you get my attention. So that being said, trip went extremely well, and I'm excited to share what God's doing, share a little bit about how the ministry that we started years ago now is starting to really take off, and you'll get to see evidence of that. So, great trip as we got into Congo. Travel this time was very lonely. I was supposed to be on this flight with Dan. This is when we were going to talk about our seminar. We were going to do 2 days together in Kinshasa. It didn't happen. But the nice thing was it was like first class the whole way because I could just lay on all the chairs I wanted. The flight attendants had nothing to do, so anytime you needed something, they were right there. So it was a really laid-back trip and zero traveling issues whatsoever. Getting into Kinshasa then, because Dan got there late, I ended up preaching in the church that he pastors on Sunday. So then Sunday night we got to sit down and talk a little bit about the plans for the 2-day seminar we were going to do together in Kinshasa. And then I headed off to the interior. He went ahead and stuck with his plan in the capital city, teaching in schools there and working in the local church there. So this was our team to the interior. Pepe always goes with us. You'll see him in every presentation that we do. And then 2 guys in the back. Front seat is the one that is our tablet trainer now and does the tablet ministry with Exelon, who was one of our professors years ago, fell into sin, has been under church discipline, has had his church discipline now lifted, and has convicted that he needs to be in the service of the Lord. So he wanted to come along the trip and see if the Lord could lead him into reconciliation and get back into the ministry. So it was pretty exciting. It was a small group, which means we can travel fast, we can travel light. It was actually, we had almost no weight in the vehicle, so we just made excellent time with 0 issues on the road. So our goal was to get to Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is a place that we had taught beginning, I think, in 2014. We started teaching in Ethiopia. By 2016, we had no students left there. So other than one pastor, Pastor Babon, who was in our first graduating class, so he just started coming to Debaya and finished his training there with us at Debaya every time we offered a class. And so Ethiopia, our last trip, when we went with Mike Webster, we spent the night in Ethiopia. We preached in the church here and another church just near the village or near the city. Ethiopia is about 300,000 people, so it's a pretty big area. But we spent the night, well, we had a group of students that came in the night. It was dark, it was raining, and they came and they had a letter, and in the letter they asked if we would consider reopening Ethiopia as a training center because they needed Bible training. And I was kind of skeptical, so I left the instructions with Poppy in Dubai. I said, go ahead and put a message out on the radio. Go ahead and, with Pastor Bavon here in Ethiopia, get the news out that we're willing to consider doing a class here again, but we're going to need some participation. People are actually going to have to show up and participate. And so this trip, the goal was to go and teach and see where we actually have people show up and get enough students that are going to commit to the program to make it worth our time and our gas to continue to go and train in Ethiopia. And so we got there, and there was people already waiting. Some of them had been waiting a couple of days. I was a day late because of the delay in Kinshasa. So they've been waiting, and they're ready. We met in an elementary school classroom. This is an elementary school that gives us classroom to use every time we're there. And so we were able to meet there and teach there. And so, there it goes. So the students that came, they were sleeping there locally. Most of them didn't live right in Ethiopia. A few of them did, but most of them had come from villages around. So this is their accommodations. They were staying off in other classrooms, off in other little offices, and they just sleep on these bamboo beds. They're just made up totally out of bamboo, and then they just lay those across there, and that's what they sleep on. This is what they travel with. They just bring a backpack with their Bible and a few things. And most of them are walking or riding bicycles for up to 2 or 3 days to come in and take these classes when we're hosting them. And so this is where their accommodations are. This is a mud stick building that is used for storage for the school, but they opened it up and allowed them to put some beds in there as well. So while they were staying there, this is where I was staying. I was in the principal's office. They cleared out the principal's office so that I could have a place to sleep. The problem was the office isn't very big. It's only about 5 feet wide by about 8 feet long. Just enough room to get my tent in and be able to barely close the door. But I wanted to go ahead and sleep in the tent anyway, because at night these guys come out and they are everywhere. It sounds like it just sounds like racket. Things rustling and things crackling as the cockroaches at night just take over the whole office. And then up in the ceiling is bats, and so the bats are up there chirping and chattering and flying around. So you don't want to just sleep out, in that. So we went ahead and put the tent and crammed into there just to have a nice zipper that you can close and sleep soundly knowing you are alone. So the office then, we just move outside, we set up a table, we do everything we need to do. Stayed in communication. Some of you that are on Facebook were getting photos and things as Mindy was posting those. And the way I did that was we just have a little modem that runs through the cell tower, and I hook it to the battery. And then from the battery we have a wire that runs up to a solar panel that we put up on top of there, and that's how we're able to have internet and get those photos and that information out so you guys knew what we were doing and where we were traveling. So we just travel with that little portable modem and hook it up to our car battery. Classroom then, as we got there, we started out with prayer, and I was shocked that we had almost 30 students on the first day. We have never in Ethiopia, in fact any of our locations, have ever had 30. We've had 25, 26. But to have 30 in one location was a record for us. And it was not only exciting to see their numbers, it was exciting to see their enthusiasm. It wasn't 30 people showing up like, hey, what are you here to give us? Hey, if we show up, is there going to be some kind of a job for us waiting later? All of them came and said, we're just here because we heard there's Bible teaching. And that was the first time that I personally have encountered that. Usually when you get a bigger group, there's all kinds of reasons for them coming besides just wanting to study. But this group, not a one of them had any sort of another request. They were just here because they wanted to learn. So teaching was intense. Tuesday through Saturday, I taught 8 hours a day, 8 a.m. till noon and then 1 till 5 p.m. And so we took a 10-minute break in each session, the morning session, the afternoon session, but 40 hours of straight teaching time. So there was, it was just go, 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 on my feet, using the chalkboard. So it was exhausting. The humidity was about 95%. The temperature was about 95 degrees. So just, drinking lots of water. I was drinking about 2 gallons of water a day, and most of that ended up in my socks, I think. It was just running down because I was sweating teaching. But it was so worth it because as as I was teaching through the classes, the questions and the interest and the desire to not only understand, but how does this apply to ministry, was so exciting, and it energized me. So that's how I kept going. When I would start to get tired, it was just adrenaline and the excitement of them wanting to learn. And this is what it just looked like every day. I mean, these guys aren't guys that are sleeping through class. They're just, everything you're telling them, they want to know more. They have more questions. In fact, I would have to tell them, okay, we're going to have to stop questions for a while because I really have to get through my material, because they more questions, more things that they wanted to know. And that was just morning till night, sun up till sundown. They were there ready to learn. Getting materials out, again, is one of our big things. And so every class we do, we have printed materials, we have now electronic materials that they can use to reinforce the teaching and participate in advancing their knowledge beyond the class. And so, just having them there, and as you're reading, they're right there reading along with you. It was just really exciting to see that they took that material and then they understood, okay, I can take this and now I can go and I can use this to teach in our church or in our ministry. It was really exciting to see how they were connecting that really quickly. Never had this happen before either. One day, one of the pastors that was taking our class, he's a pastor of a group of churches that's called the Evangelistic Church Fellowship of the World, or something like that in French. But anyway, I'd never met these churches before, but as I was talking to them, their doctrinal statement is really, really good. They just have deviated from it in the fact that they didn't understand, okay, so this is what it says about, for example, interpreting the Bible, having a literal historical interpretation. They said, we don't even know what that means. Our church believes it, but we don't even know what that means. And so it was really neat because as he was learning, and he represents about 5 or 6 churches in the Hidiofa area, he said, as he's learning this, he said, we see these things in our doctrinal statement, but nobody ever explained it. He said, this is amazing. We got to get out and teach this in our churches. And he got really excited. So he came to class one day, and he said, there was a group that came through, and they gave me a case of New Testament, Gideon New Testaments. And he said, I've been praying, what do I do with these New Testaments? He said, all of our students here are taking these New Testaments to get out and use in their ministries. And so this is the first time I've ever had a Congolese pastor come to one of our classes and give something out to help the other students in the ministry. It's always, you need to bring us this, you need to bring us that. This is the first time I've ever seen them come and say, we're going to give this for the ministry. Yeah.
What language were they?
French. Yep, they're in French. So yeah, it was really exciting. And so, and for you that are Gideons, keep up the good work. The word is getting out, and God is using that word. And so I was just excited to see that. In fact, I didn't even have any Gideons with me this time. A lot of times there's a guy in the capital city that will give me some for my trips to pass out, and he didn't have any. In fact, there's a major Bible crisis in the whole country right now. The printers are shut down because of COVID. The shipping now isn't coming in anymore, and the warehouses are depleted. We're in Kinshasa, and so there really are, you can't find Bibles to buy. And yet, so I couldn't get any New Testaments to take in. I got one case of Louis Sigon's, the French whole Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, because I knew we had students that had already ordered Bibles and didn't have one. So I literally sent the guys out and scoured the city to come up with 30 Bibles, but that was all we could find. And so what a blessing to have him come and just say, hey, I just want to give this for the Lord's work and to encourage the other students. The tablet ministry is going on. Francis was in the vehicle with us when we went up, and so he was taking he took a Sunday afternoon and then evenings after we were done with class. He was teaching all of the students how to use their tablets. Most of them now have purchased a tablet through the ministry. We have basically we're buying them here at about $100. The software put on them is about $20, so it's about a $120 investment, and we're selling them to the pastors for $30. So our ministry funds supplement that and offset those costs. But what that does is it makes them responsible to contribute, and they realize this has some value. And the second thing that it does is it gets them in the habit of getting ready. Okay, when they come and they have things, we need to be prepared also to contribute to participate in this ministry. So their first one they can get for $30. If they break it or lose it, the next one is $120. They have to pay the full price. So Francie, then we had about 25 tablets I took up to Ethiopia. And so most of the students were prepared and they bought one. So Francie was teaching them how to use the tablets. And it's painful for me to watch. And I'm so thankful for Francie and his patience, because he'll literally draw a picture of a tablet on the chalkboard. Okay, this is where you plug in your headphones. This is where you put in a USB. This is the volume. Like, he'll just go through it, because these guys have never touched an electronic device in their life. And he's trying to teach them how to get on and study the Bible and use, Greek dictionaries and concordances. And he just has so much patience with them. So every day in the night, he was teaching them. And then all day Sunday afternoon after our church services, he was teaching them. And so then any problems they have, he gives them the phone number. They can call him. He's their tech line. When they need to run updates or they delete things because they pushed the wrong button, he walks them through how to get that stuff back. And I'm just so thankful for Francie and his patience. By the way, Francie was one that worked with us in Dubai Lubwe. When we built our house, my mom and dad, Chris and Dorothy, came and visited us our first term, and Dad worked with Francie to put the roof on our house. And so Francie started out in Dubai as just a day worker helping us with projects. Ended up accepting Christ. We baptized him. He went down to the capital city to learn English and become an English teacher, and worked with the wards down there. He was their night watchman, slept on their property, and that's how he paid for his college, was working for them as a night watchman. And now he's graduated school and he's seeking the Lord's will, but he knows he wants to serve God. So one of the ministries that he's committed to doing is doing this tablet ministry and making sure the pastors have access to these resources. And so just so neat to watch somebody that's grown in the Lord and now turning back around and serving and excited to do it. So this was our class. We ended up, like I said, all together we had about 35 that participated, but of those about 20, I think 28 were registered students, which was just amazing for us to have in Ethiopia. And so it was just, it was exciting. It was exciting to teach a class that big. A little bit difficult to manage because they feed off each other with the questions, and it was just like, whoa, you guys are overloading me. Like, okay, let's just time out questions for a minute and get back to this. So, but it was really fun, and it was exciting. So I broke the group up in a couple of photos. These are all guys that live in Ethiopia, or right near Ethiopia, and then are going to continue to study there. So I think we've got 18 students in Ethiopia itself. These guys came from Dubai Lubwe because they want to graduate in the next graduating class, which Lord willing will be in June. And so they were missing a class, and this was the class I was teaching. So they had started late in Dubai, so they wanted to come and catch that class so they could graduate in June. And so they came all the way from Dubai Lubwe, about 65 miles. And they came on rented motorcycles. That's how they got there. And so that was really neat to have them with us. And then these are the ones from Mongai. Now Mongai is the one where our church in Dubai went out and preached the gospel in Mongai, started then a center of Bible studies and home churches there. That organized into a church, and last time I was there, Mike preached in Dubai Lubwe. I went into Mongai and found 200 people that were meeting there. And this man right here is the man that they are praying will be their pastor. So he came from Mongai. He's now studying in Mongai. Poppy is going there and teaching the classes in Mongai. We have 17 students in Mongai, but these guys want to accelerate their studies. And so they came all the way from Mongai to get this class so they can be kind of on a fast track to keep going. So all of these guys came from Mongai. This guy, Opep, I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. But it was just really exciting to see their commitment to come about 80 miles. They came from Mongai just so they could be here for this class. Oh, the lady, she's the director of the children's ministry in Mongai. And so she said, how am I going to teach the children if I don't know the word? So she's taking the classes as well so she can do that. And then there's another ministry in Gerazim that specifically teaches Sunday school, how to teach Sunday school in the churches. And so she's taking our classes to a certain degree, and then she'll transfer to Gerazim and do the Sunday school ministry there. project. So she's doing her basic courses with us, how to share your faith, basic discipleship, basic Bible doctrines, Old and New Testament survey, and then practical ministry. She'll go into Sunday school program at Harrison. So I was really excited that she came and just, she said, how am I going to teach the kids if I don't know the Bible? So I was excited to see her enthusiasm. So OPEP was one of them from Mongai. And interesting, as we were heading out to the village, we'd finished teaching on Saturday, and we were going to go to a church plant. I'll show you here in just a little bit. And I wanted to go and visit the church and see it. And so as we were driving about towards Debaya. We ended up getting about 5 hours from Debaya as we were heading out to this other church. But we were driving along the road, and I look up and I was like, that's open. You know, what is he doing out here walking? So we pulled over, and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I had enough money to get to class, to buy the tablet, to buy the books. He said, but I didn't have enough money to go back, so I'm walking back. And I was like, we're walking back to Mongai? Yeah, that's 80 miles. 80 miles. And he's just, I knew that when I came. I knew I only had enough money to get there, and I knew I was going to have to walk back. So he said, I'm just walking back. And I said, well, get in. We're going about 15 miles to this village to join this church. So he jumped in the vehicle with us, and as we were driving, I was asking him his testimony, because with such a big group, I didn't get a chance to sit down and talk with every single one of them. And I said, oh, tell me your story. How did you end up being a student in Mongai? And why did you come all the way to Yofa to kind of fast-track your studies? And he said, well, it was about 4 years ago I got really sick. And I really thought I was on my deathbed, and I thought I was going to die, and I was scared I was going to die. And my neighbor said, do you want my pastor to come over and talk to you before you die? And he said, yeah, I do. So he said, this pastor came over and he told me, if I don't believe in Jesus Christ and I don't have forgiveness of my sins, I'm going to go to hell. And he said, I was scared. And he said, so I told him, I want Jesus. I want to believe in Jesus. He said, okay. So he said, if you believe in Jesus, you're going to go to heaven. And that was it. That's all he knew. And he said, I said I believe, but he said, then I got better. And so he went to this guy's church, and he said it seemed really strange because it was all about magic and, getting these powers from the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. And he said, none of that really made sense. He said, I didn't really see how any of that was helping me not go to hell. And so he said, I kind of just lost interest. But he's a fisherman. He was down fishing in the port about a year ago, down in Mongai. Poppy had come to teach the Bible Institute class, but Poppy also supports himself and his family by working on the side. The Bible Institute gives him a little bit, what the students pay, he gets a percentage of that, but it's really not enough yet for him to live on because our classes are still pretty small. And so he supplements his income by, he's also a metal worker, so he builds little barbecue things, and he does things with metal to supplement his income, but he's also a fisherman. And so he was teaching in Mongai. It was their day off. So he went down to the area down in Mongai, and he was fishing, and he ran into Obed. And as they were fishing, he said, let's fish together, because two people, we can use a bigger net, we can bring in more fish. They started working together, and Poppy started sharing Christ with him. And he said, I believed in Christ, but I didn't know what Christ really did for me. Nobody talked to me about Christ dying on the cross. Nobody talked to me about the shedding of his blood, washing me of my sins. And so Poppy shared Christ with him, and he said, well, that's what I need. I need to believe in what Christ did. And he made a profession of faith in Christ. And so that new church in Mongai that I visited last trip, he went there, and he heard the teaching of the Bible, and he said, how did you guys learn this? Well, we're studying at the Bible Institute. And he said, I need to learn this too. And so he's been a student now for about 4 months. And his desire, as we were driving to the village, I said, so when you finish, what do you want to do? He said, my village that I was born in across the river, there's nobody talking about Jesus. He said, I've never my whole life heard about Jesus in that village. And he said, so I'm going to learn the word, I'm going to go and I'm going to start a church there. And so I was just excited. I wouldn't have even gotten to talk to him if he wasn't walking back. So we were able to take him most of the way, and then the rest of the 55 miles or so, he had to walk. And so just exciting to see their passion and their commitment, and his excitement to learn the word. So we got to Mashum, dropped Opep off. He went to church with us, and then he went on his way out from there. And it was exciting when I found in Mashum. To make a long story short, because time's going to go quickly, our student in Ethiopia, Pastor Bavon, pastors the church there. He had heard in Mashum that there was a school, but there were no churches. There was a Christian school, but no church. And so he went to meet with the school principal and said, how do you have a Christian school without a church? What are you even teaching? Where do the kids go to church? Well, we don't know. We don't know anything about the Bible. We just were told to start a Christian school, so we did. And so Pastor Balbon started going. It's about a 25-mile trip from Ethiopia. He started going out on foot once a month and teaching the Bible there in Mashum. And he started teaching with the teachers and the principal. Well, that grew to the rest of the village. And pretty soon he had about 40 or 50 people every time that he would go that were meeting there. So at our graduation ceremony that we had over a year ago now, we had our graduation ceremony, and Pastor Balbon was one of our graduates. And he asked me at the graduation, he said, here's the problem with Mashum. I need somebody that can go and follow these believers, that can teach and get it going. He said, what are we going to do? And I said, well, one of our graduates, Jonas, just moved from Elebo and is looking for a place to settle and asked me to help him pray about a church that he could find a minister in or a village he could plant a church in. So why don't you talk to Jonas, which is Jonah in French. So why don't you talk to Jonas and see if maybe you guys could work together and get that church going. So they had a conversation. We came back to the States, and to make a long story short, they partnered together. So Jonas and Babon said, let's get this church going. So Jonas moved there. He built a house out on the edge of the village. And this whole church building, basically, he and the people there built. They went out in the forest, they cut the bamboo, they got the mud, they packed it in. And all of this church now is about 250 people. And Jonas wasn't there when we were there. He had a family situation. He had to travel and go visit an uncle in the hospital that was dying. So I didn't get to see him. But all of this and the whole testimony of everybody I talked to was, we didn't know anything about the Bible until Pastor Babon came. And then when Jonas came, he went and he shared the gospel in every house in the whole village. And now we have 250 people that are coming to church. Most of them have made professions of faith and are baptized. And all of that was because of our students that said, we're going to take what we learned and we're going to go out and we're going to teach that and we're going to use it. And so it was just neat to see, without him even being there, just hearing the testimony and his testimony in the village, that they're putting into practice the things that they've learned. And so that was really neat to see. It was really encouraging to get to see the church there that we knew was kind of starting. I preached in that village once when there was about 10 people that came as I was preaching. And now to go back and preach and have 200 plus was just amazing. So from there, we finished up the class, preached in Mashung on Sunday. Monday then we headed out, and I got asked to go to a village called Elom. Never had heard of it. I didn't even know where it was. I didn't have a map with me. My phone didn't, Google Earth wasn't working. We were out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm just like, okay, let's go. I don't know where we're going. I was like, can we get there with a vehicle? Or are we going to have to walk in? Like, what's the situation? No, we can drive most of the way. I'm like, okay, that sounds not encouraging. But so anyway, I said, okay, let's go. The reason we went was because Pastor Emmanuel, who we worked with in Bailugwe for several years and is now in Kikwit, he heard through the school systems that this village had a Christian school with no church. And one of the principals was in Kikwit and said, hey, we've got this school out here. We have no church, we have no Bibles, we have no professor for religion. We actually don't have anything spiritual going on whatsoever in this village. Could you maybe come and teach sometime in our village? So Pastor Emmanuel got permission from the school coordinator and got financing to get a motorcycle and to go out. And so he went out and he preached, and he said as he was preaching with the teachers and some of the people in the area around the school, he said just more and more people kept coming and coming. Pretty soon he said, I was preaching, there was about 200 people listening to me as I was preaching. He said I was just sharing the gospel, starting in Genesis, the problem of sin, and sharing eventually to Christ. And he said at the end they said, you've got to come back. You've got to come back. We need more Bible teaching. So he had made a second trip out there, and this time he said there was about 250 people, and he said after he was done preaching, 70 of them said, we need to accept Christ. We need Christ. And so he said, could we go back and spend some time teaching there on our way back? And I said, sure, let's go. Let's go see what's going on in Elam. So we stopped in Elam. This is our people that welcomed us here. Some of them are elders in the village, teachers from the school. This young guy, these two young guys here are ones that just said, hey, we're listening and we want to know, we want to learn more about the Bible. And so they were the ones that welcomed us. Here's Pastor Emmanuel. He'd been out there preaching already twice. And so we stopped in the village and of course, the first thing that happens anytime a white guy shows up is every kid in the village has got to come see this white guy. I mean, they've never seen a white guy before. They've heard about him, but are they real? Does that white stuff rub off? They all want to touch you. Why isn't your hair curly? We want to feel your hair. That's weird. And so the kids all come out. Well, Pastor Emmanuel and Pepe, who was with us, our driver, Pepe is also a great teacher. And so they said, let's get all these kids together. They started teaching them stories starting with creation and the problem of sin. They were teaching them songs and started singing with the kids. So they spent about 2 hours there teaching the kids. And the kids just loved it. They just flocked to them and they were teaching. And I was just enjoying this. And they were teaching in Lingala, Congo, because most of the kids at that age won't know French yet. And so I was just enjoying sitting back watching these kids just hearing the gospel for the first time. It was really cool. So then as it got late, all the villagers came in from their fields into the evening. It was getting to be dusk. And they said, okay, we want you to teach us. And so I don't have pictures of the full crowd because a lot of them came after it was dark. And I was literally just using the flashlight on my phone. I had my scriptures. I couldn't even necessarily see everybody that was there. It was pitch black. But I was teaching the Word. I talked for a couple hours about salvation and then what happens after salvation. Because I heard already many had made a profession of faith. So I talked about baptism. I talked about walking with the Lord, being a part of a fellowship in the church. And I was teaching out of Acts chapter 2. And what does it mean to be a church? And what do believers do once they get saved? So when we got done teaching, all of a sudden everybody came up and said, well, we need to get baptized. And so Pastor Emmanuel said, well, I was hoping to come back sometime and teach on baptism and do a baptism service. So I ended up teaching about another 45 minutes specifically on baptism. And at the end they said, we want to get baptized. So in the morning we had others that said, we heard there's going to be baptism today and we missed the teaching on baptism. So Pastor Emmanuel and Excellent, they sat down with those who had missed it the night before and they spent the morning teaching on salvation and baptism and what it means to be a part of a church. And so after they taught in the morning, we took off, and I'm not going to lie to you, I thought I was going to die. We headed out on this trail, and they said, it's just a little ways down to where the water is. Just a little ways down to where the water is. Now, a little ways in Africa can mean a lot of things. It can be literally 5 or 6 steps, but it can also be, maybe 5 or 6 hours of travel time. And so, we head down this path, and this canyon's deep, and it was straight down. It had been raining in the morning, and it was slippery mud going straight down to this canyon. And we went about at least a mile, maybe a mile and a half down into the bottom of the canyon. And down in the bottom on this little trail, it broke out to this little stream, and in this stream there was a place that was just enough water we could do a baptism. And so we get down there, and of course, normally then everybody that gets baptized is going to share their testimony. They're going to share how they heard about the gospel. They're going to share a verse or something, some truth that really touched them to let them know and assure them of their salvation. And so because of the way this thing was, there wasn't really an area where we could everybody get around. So we literally had to bring them down 2 at a time down to the river and let them share their testimony. So it was pretty exciting. One of the things too that was exciting for me, Pastor Emmanuel, who had been preaching there and built a relationship, did the baptism. And then we asked Francie to help him, and it was just so cool. This is the first time in my life I ever saw somebody that I baptized now baptizing other believers, and it was awesome. And so Francie and Pastor Emmanuel were down there, and as they were coming down into the water, sharing their testimonies, and just to be honest, there was more that came down as they were sharing their testimony. It was like, I don't think you quite understand the gospel yet. So there were some that had come that didn't end up getting baptized because their testimony was not clear. They didn't really know what they believed, or they didn't understand it fully. But in general, it was just really, really exciting. And so Pastor Emmanuel and Francie down there baptized people. We ended up baptizing 46 believers, and it was just rejoicing. As we walked back up, I texted Mindy when I got back to the top of the hill. I said, if we're going to keep this ministry up, I'm going to have to either get younger or lose weight, one or the other. And I think only one of those is possible. And by the way, my goal on this trip was to lose some weight, but I was sabotaged because between Becky Ward and the stuff WMF sent with me when I left, I didn't lose any weight. I just was eating my Doritos in the middle of the jungle. Anyway. Thank you, ladies. I really appreciated the jerky and the nuts and the chips. It kept me going on those days of teaching 8 hours straight. But anyway, back to the thing at hand. This was Moise, one of the guys that was baptized. And so Moise, after sharing his testimony and getting baptized, he said, I have to help this village know God's Word. And so he committed to being one of our students at Bible Institute. He's already called Poppy, and he's already registered to continue the studies with the group in Ethiopia. So it's really exciting because now we're going to have a follow-up, and we're going to have somebody that's learning and going back and continuing to teach those believers. And of course, Pastor Emmanuel will make a few trips, and we'll stop in and check on him sometimes as well. But one of the big things when we see these young believers, we see these new groups of Christians, the first thing then that we do is we have to identify who's going to be teaching them. We can't allow them to sit out there and then get taken prey by false teachers or fade away because they're not being fed the Word of God. So it's so neat that God already led Moise to step up and study and to go and continue that teaching ministry. So heading back then, we left Elon, coming back towards Kikwit. Kikwit's a city of 3 million people. We have a church there that's, 40 or 50 years old in the ELPC. Grandpa Bob started it back in the Baptist Mid-Missions day, Bob Grings. So the Baptist Mid-Mission Church, Baptist Mid-Missions pulled out, ecumenism, communism, whatever is going on in Congo was going on. And so that church, it struggled for a lot of years. They didn't have government recognition. They kind of had to meet in private, in homes. But here we are now, 40 years later. They have a property. They have basically everything they need. They have Bible teaching. They have good, solid people that have been to Bible schools that could lead that ministry. And yet that church, after all these years, is 8 people. And just always struggling, every time we go there, it's just, well, we can't have a strong church because of this. Excuses, complaining, whining, blah, blah, blah. Every time we go. And so we decided this time, I said, we've got to stop and keep it and find out what's going on with this church, because we heard the guy they had asked to be their pastor, they had suspended him as pastor, and I heard they hadn't even had a church service in like 6 months, even with COVID opening up. They just hadn't been meeting. So I wanted to stop and find out what was going on. The problem was we got there and this huge rainstorm came through. And that rainstorm, this normally is pavement, but that rainstorm brought the mountain down and it created this huge mudslide. It filled the whole city of Kikwit. So I was up at the church, drove up the hill with the vehicle. I was up at the church teaching. I left Pepe and Francie down at the fuel station because they wanted to buy some corn and some things in Kikwit that are cheaper there than Kinshasa and take back to their homes in Kinshasa with them. And so they were taking recordings of this whole mudslide. I'm just up there teaching, and Pepe got videos of the whole hill just coming down and mud filling the whole street. I'm up there teaching. I'm clueless, it's raining and I'm just teaching and I'm talking. Actually, I did very little teaching this time. When I sat down with the church at Kikwit, there was about 10 people that showed up when I called them and said, let's have a meeting and find out what's going on. And I said, I've been here personally at least 8 times teaching in this church on how to reach people for Christ, how to have a church that's in order, how to work together and cooperate together, biblical qualifications for church leadership. We've talked about all this. Other people have come. Dan's been up here. Other pastors from our association of churches, Congolese pastors, have been up here. You've got 2 people that are members of your church that have been to Bible school. And, what is going on? What is keeping this church from reaching this city? There's 3 million people in this city, and you can't get more than 8 people over 40 years to show up to church on Sunday. What is going on? You tell me. So finally they opened up, and basically they hate each other. They hate each other. There's jealousy. There's old grudges. There's family feuds that have been going on for years. And they said, the reason that we don't have church here is because we don't love each other. And I said, well, do you think that God's going to bless a church where you guys refuse to love each other? And they said, no. And we know that's why we don't have a good church. And so basically then I talked to them and I said, you've got two options. You can either do a replant where you just start completely over and say everything from the past is gone. We're just going to start over. Or you can dissolve it and just say we're all just going to go to other churches. There really aren't any good Bible churches in Keekwood. 3 million people, and most of the churches are heavily charismatic or are totally legalistic. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, those kinds of things. And I said, you guys have a real opportunity here to be a light in a city of darkness, and yet you're squandering it. So after tears, there was some forgiving of each other from old things from the past. They decided to try doing a replant. So they just took away all their old titles. You know, so-and-so's been deacon for 20 years, and so-and-so's been church secretary for 15 years. So let's just get rid of all that, and let's just go back to loving each other and preaching the gospel. And so Pastor Congo from Kinshasa is up there this week, and he said he would go up and work with them on how do you get back to just sharing the gospel with the people in your community and around, and starting out with a passion to reach the lost. And so, pray for the church at Keekwood. In the meantime, the mudslide happened. I came around with the vehicle after spending a couple hours with the church. The rain kind of slowed down. I came down and I buried the Land Cruiser, the deepest in mud that I have ever done in my life. And it took me about 2 hours to get out of that mud hole because I didn't realize there was a mudslide, and I just drove right into it. So anyway, we ended up jacking up. We had to take the high lift jack and put it in each rim, jack the wheel up. These little shops on the side of the road, a lot of them had just slid down in the mud, so there was all these broken boards from their shops. We just bent the nails down so the nails weren't sticking up, and we put them under our wheels, put them under our jacks, and eventually after a couple hours we got out. So Keekwood and I just don't have a good relationship. I'm out of time, but I'm going to tell you a story anyway. Keekwood's the reason Mindy and I first felt the call to Congo. If you remember way, way back in a land far, far away, there was a trip that Mike Barden made out to the Congo. And he and Dan set out on motorcycles, and their goal was to get to Ethiopia, where I just did my class. But in that day, there was no paved road, and so it was about a 5-day trip on motorcycles to get up to Ethiopia. The trip that we made in about a 20-hour, not even 20, about 19-hour drive into Ethiopia in our vehicle. They used to have to do 5 days on motorcycles. Well, along the way, trying to get here into Keekwood, Mike had crashed the motorcycle and he had hurt his back really bad. But there is an airstrip in Keekwood, and so there was an airplane that was there getting supplies from Keekwood flying back to Kinshasa, so they were able to pay a ticket, and he got to sit between two goats and fly back to Kinshasa. But while he was waiting, this church that's been there all these years were telling him, we don't have a pastor, and we don't have Bibles, and we don't have a building, and we don't have the same thing they tell me every time I'm there. So they were telling him all these things, and he just said, well, I'll pray for you. And he wrote in his prayer letter, he said, I just found it hard to believe I was sitting in a city of, at that time, 1.5 million people, and yet the Bible-believing church is just these few people meeting under a tree. And he said, someday somebody's going to have to come and reach these people. And that prayer letter was one of the things that touched Mindy and I. Said, what if you call us to go? We'll go reach those people in Keekwood. Man, I'm glad he didn't send me to Keekwood. But Keekwood's just always something. Every time we go there's some story. Either somebody steals our cokes off our truck in the night, or some government office won't let me leave until I go and spend hours in their office trying to justify some paperwork that I'm not even supposed to have. And anyway, so Keekwood and I always have some sort of trouble. But keep praying for Keekwood. That church, they need to reach people with the gospel. That city is too big to not have a gospel presence. And so keep praying for Keekwood, and we haven't quite given up on them yet. I told them I'll come back and see how they're doing. So way back, this is roadside, McDonald's in our travels. There's no restaurants, there's no hotels, so anything that we take, we have to take with us. So a lot of the things that we do, I'll either take cans of little hot dogs or cans of ravioli or canned spaghetti, and I just set it on the engine while we're driving. You get somewhere, it's hot, you open it up, eat. We'll make tuna, take a jar of mayonnaise and packages of tuna, make tuna sandwiches. So we take breaks and eat along the road. Getting back to Kinshasa, then Dan and I did get to do our seminar. We had 2 days of seminars, Friday and Saturday. I got in on Wednesday. So Thursday, basically, I cleaned up, washed my clothes, helped Dan work on his Land Cruiser. We put an air locker, a differential locker in his Land Cruiser. I'm jealous now because I really think that might have kept me from getting stuck in the mud. But anyway, we'll see if I ever get around to getting one for our Land Cruiser. But anyway, Thursday was a work day, cleanup day. Friday and Saturday, we got back to teaching seminars. So we had all the pastors and Christian teachers, Christian leaders from all the churches in Kinshasa. We had about 60 on Friday, about 80 on Saturday. And so we did seminars from morning until late afternoon and just took turns teaching. That was a little nicer because I could teach and then I actually got a little bit of a break and got to listen to Dan's teaching. But it was a great time of fellowship. And just then having a Q&A time and getting to spend time answering questions on some of the things that the churches in Kinshasa are struggling with. Then on Sunday, before I flew back, I went and visited a church in Bigwa. It's on the outskirts of Kinshasa, about an hour from the Green's house as you head out and get outside of Kinshasa a little bit. This church I've tried to visit 3 times, and every time something happened that we didn't get there, whether it's a vehicle breakdown or a traffic jam that got us to where we didn't make it to the church. One day, it just a huge rain once we got out there. So finally, I got out to this church at Bigwa. Pastor Viento, I've known him for a long time. He's always asked me to come and preach at the church. In fact, one time he said, "I don't think you like me because you keep saying you'll come, but you never come." So finally, I got out to the church at Bigwa, and what a joy! What a joy! It was just this. I'm just going to tell you the truth. There are some churches that you visit, and you can just tell it's a facade. You show up, and people, they're singing hymns, but nobody knows the songs. They're just lip singing because they don't really know the words. And, you know, the pastor's preaching, or I'm preaching, and you just kind of get this glazed over look. We've never heard anything like this before. And you can tell that it's like, oh, the missionary's coming, everybody should come to church, let's fill up the building and make it look like this church is really big and really prominent. And there's just some churches that are that way. It's just, you know that it's just not real. And yet, then there's churches where you go, and you just see the joy of the believers being together. They know each other, they know the songs, they're excited. You tell them, hey, I'm going to John chapter 8, and people are turning in their Bibles and they're reading along with you. You're teaching, and they're, yeah, amen, and they're engaged and they're following. You ask them a question and they answer. And you can just tell these believers, they fellowship together, they love the Lord, they love the Word, and that's what this church at Bigwa was. I just went, and their excitement and their joy, the testimony of the pastor and the community, people were coming up, hey pastor, strangers walking along the road, and he was talking with them, and they knew him, and you could just tell he loved the people, he loved the community, the church loved the Lord. It was just a joy. It was a joy to be there. I really enjoyed my time at Bigwa. And then Monday, cleaning up, packing up, and then flying back. And the airplane was just going to be coming back as it was going. So I'm telling you, if you want to go to Congo right now, now is the time. Now is the time. You don't have to share your chair with anybody. Like, you can just go. So what a joy it was. Just me and one guy in a plane built for 200 people. It was great. So anyway, it was a great trip. The Lord is doing amazing things. And it's just great to see the seeds planted years ago starting now to take off. The churches that we labored with years ago, they're going out and planting new churches and new works. And, it was just, the whole trip was just exciting. There really wasn't anything bad that happened. Like, the only thing I can complain about is Kiwi. I mean, it was just a really, really good trip. So, I do have a letter I want to read to you that the church I sent to me in Ethiopia, but before I do that, do you guys have any questions? Yeah, Ben.
You mentioned that Pastor Emmanuel is in Kikwit also. Does he have a different church, or where does he work?
Yeah, so Kikwit's 3 million people. He moved there because of health reasons. He was pastoring in Dubai with me. He was co-pastoring the church. His intention was to move back to Dubai, but because of health, he hadn't been able to. So he has a church meeting now in his home, but he's heading back to Dubai, I think, in January, February, because his health situation is pretty much resolved. So he's going to go first and get the house set up, and then the family will come. Yep. Good, Jim. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I've got an official letter from Beautiful Feet Baptist Church in Dubai, Lubwe. I got a message from them, and they were very hurt that I didn't go to Dubai. And, you know, do you not love us anymore? What did we do wrong? And so I called the pastor there, and I called some other people in the church, and I said, no, you know, we're here in Ethiopia. This is why, because we had these students that asked us to come. But, you know, I promised them, you're not forgotten. We'll come back to Dubai, Lord willing, someday. But they did send a letter. They wanted you guys to know what's going on in Dubai, because I didn't get to go, and they were afraid I wasn't going to come back and give a report of the church in Dubai. So they sent you a report from the church in Dubai. It's in French. It's handwritten. It has the stamp of Beautiful Feet Baptist Church on there. So I'll set the French up here. You can come look at it if you want. But this is, I rough translated it into English because I thought you might appreciate it. So this is what they wrote. Report from Beautiful Feet Baptist Church. We, the members of the local church, Beaupier, greet you in the name of the Lord. We are doing well here at the local church. Number 1, activities of the church. We have opened a center of evangelism at Shiluma, which is on the other side of Dubai, Lubwe. It's about 6 miles to the other side of town. That will be supervised by Maker Mandungu, who happens to be one of our Bible Institute graduates. We have completed the construction of a church office off the side of our church building. Although we were slowed down by COVID-19, we have started other activities of the church for evangelizing in the villages of Mangai 1, which is the church that I visited that has 200 people, and then the pastor came and is studying with us in Ethiopia. They started now further out, a center to evangelize in Mangai 2, in Gibeal, which is out in the forest towards Ethiopia, in Binko, which is about 20 minutes towards Mangai from Dubai, and in Malung. And I don't even know where Malung is. I'm going to have to get out a map and find that. Problems that they've found during COVID-19. We've not been able to hold a baptism service, but we are currently doing a baptism class. Difficulties that they're experiencing. They've lost their church documents, the copy of the church constitution, their bylaws, and all their original signed paperwork, which I have copies of in my file folder in Dubai. So next time I go, I'll have to get my locked safe out and photocopy those for them. 2, in our ELBC schools, the administration is not being respected. The superintendent is hiring professors without following the proper channels. He's only hiring people from his tribe and is not including the church in the decision-making process. This disorder is starting to cause problems in the church. Seeing all this confusion, we're hoping that the bylaws of ELBC will be respected. Our school principals are also not wanting to cooperate with the church. For the church, done in Dubai, Lubwe, the 4th of November, 2020, Pastor DJ. So that's the church report that they sent for you, so that you guys can be praying for them and know how things are going. And as I've shared in the past, excited about the gospel, and one of the biggest things that divides and divides and divides the churches is the relationship between state and the schools, and the church and the state in the schools. And so for those of you that haven't heard our reports in the past, basically the government doesn't run schools, they fund schools. And they hire the churches to run schools for them. So the state pays the church to hire people to run schools. And so the church is supposed to be the administrative side of it, and the schools and the state's supposed to be the financial side of it. The problem is, wherever there's money and there's power to be gained, the fighting starts in the churches. And so that's what they were writing there, is that these things just come in and they just destroy the love that the people have for each other, because it's all about who's going to get a job. And so that's one of the things that we've been battling for a long time. And we had it kind of settled with an administrative process, and if it was respected, it was working. So they're just writing to say that process is breaking down and it is being respected anyway. I have a letter of testimony as well.
Do the next slide.
Oh, I have a slide. You can switch it up there too. I have a letter of testimony from Pastor Emmanuel, who's right here. Pastor Bopay from Gerazim, who's overseeing that Sunday school training ministry, and from Poppy, who is now our secretary for the Bible Institute and is keeping everything going while we're away. These guys are on our committee of our council for the Bible Institute. And so they also wrote a letter of testimony from the Bible Institute ministry, and they wanted you to know what they're doing and how things are going while we're gone. I did not translate this into English, so I'm just going to kind of roughly do it as I go because it's more bullet points than it is actually a letter. So they said, first off, they thank you. This is them writing the letter there that I've got. So they say, first off, I thank you in the name of our gracious God for His love and His great manifestation in our lives every day. He says, thank you equally for the missionary couple, Sparky and Minnie, for their sacrifice to come and suffer with us, their brothers, Congolese brothers, in opening up the Bible Institute for the forming of servants that will be capable and faithful to transmit effectively the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our humble knowledge and our humble knowledge and our humble gratitude for all of you that are donating, in spite of your suffering, in spite of your difficulties, you continue to give faithfully to this ministry that is impacting so many lives. So this is what they've done. In the last few years, they've maintained the Bible, the bibliothèque, the library, and the Center of Theology. They've continued to maintain the classroom with 3 classes. They're functioning the office regularly and daily. They're taking care of the dorms that were built. So this is just letting us know that the things that we've done in the past, they're maintaining them. They're not letting it fall in disarray or it's been forgotten or isn't being used. So for functioning, they said that they got 5 sites right now that they're teaching in. In Dubai, Lubwe, where is our center, they've got 23 students. At Idiofa, where we just taught, they had 21 at the time of this writing, but now that's up to 28. Site in Kolakema, which is across the river from us, they have 8 students. Makangulu, I actually don't know where it is, I've never been there, but they have 11 students. And in Mangai, they have 15 students. So this is the number of students that they have. So total, right now, they have 78 students that are actively enrolled in the program, and they have 11 that will graduate in June with the second group of graduates. So these are the distances that they're traveling to teach these courses. Dubai Lubwe is home. Idiofa is about 65 miles. Mangai is about 40 miles. Makangulu is about 20 miles, and Kolakema is about 120 miles. So one of the ways they're doing that is we have bicycles for some of the shorter distances that they use, and we did purchase a motorcycle and taught them how to do oil changes and basic maintenance on it. So they have a motorcycle to use for the longer trips. These are projects that they're currently working on. They're continuing to move forward with chapel building, which the funding for that, this is crazy. We didn't leave any money to build a chapel. What we did leave money for was to continue our legal documents moving forward for the Bible Institute ministry, and then we left Bibles and tablets that they were to collect fees when they sell those at a reduced price. And normally then when we come, we collect those funds and we use that to buy more Bibles and more tablets. Well, they had texted and said, this money's building up. You know, we've now got several $1,000s from selling Bibles and tablets, extra money from going to Manudu and working on our documents legally. And it's just sitting here, which one is kind of dangerous, and two, it's not being used for the Lord's work. So could we just take those funds and start working on a chapel building? And I was like, sure. I just texted them, yeah, go for it. And I was like, they're not going to get anything done. So they've already laid the whole foundation, and they've already made all the bricks that they need. And one of our church members is a mason. He's donating his time and coming up with church members donating their time. And they're already starting to put the walls up. So they're going to send us some pictures soon of what that chapel building looks like. But they're doing that with the things that we left them there as resources. And I was just excited that they took that initiative and didn't say, hey, you need to send money to do this. They just said, hey, can we use this for the Lord's work? And so I was excited to see that. And by God's grace, more funds came into our ministry account for more tablets and Bibles. So it just worked out. God just took care of it. So they're working on that. And they bought a cow because they want to start raising beef. Because they have lots of land, lots of grass. They said, all this grass, we're just having to keep cut it. Why don't we buy some cows and we could sell the beef? So they bought a cow, and they're starting a beef project. So good for them. So just as long as it's not in my backyard, we get back. That's all I care. So projects to come. Their number one thing, they want to keep reinforcing biblical comprehension. We just have to keep working on that. They want to continue to produce literature and have Bibles available to battle false doctrines. They want to raise the level of our formation. So right now we have 18 courses in the Bible Institute. They would like to add 18 more and go a little deeper into studying Word and understanding things better. They want to open up new sites of teaching. They want to increase the number of professors because they're getting spread thin. They want to build some houses to help professor housing so that they'll not have to worry about housing while they're teaching. And they want to continue to protect and maintain the property. So in the absence of Pastor Sparky, they said in reading 2 Timothy 2:9, in spite of the absence of Pastor Sparky, the Word of God and the work of the Bible Institute cannot go without doing its function. It's imperative that we signal all of our givers who support this work and all of those who are active in praying for this institute continue to support the work here in Congo. They give a little financial report and then they close it with their signatures. So that letter's here as well. So that's what's going on in the Bible Institute while we're gone. So I've gone over time a little bit. So
Mike and Melanie will be translating.
oh yeah. So I emailed that to Mike and Melanie. Mike is on our council too for the Bible Institute ministry. Mike and Melanie have helped us find so many resources and books and things we can use in teaching ministry. So I sent that to Mike and Melanie, and they're going to translate that into English, and we're going to actually print that in prayer letter. So that'll be coming out in English with them translated. And I asked them to translate, one, because I don't want people to think that I slanted the translation to say things that it doesn't say. And two, because Mike and Melanie are really excited about the ministry and they want to help. So it's a way that they could be involved and participate in what's going on in Congo stuff. So yeah, so that'll be coming out in English soon, and we'll get that in our mail-out letter through iPhone. Any last questions? Yeah.
Related thing, Mike, what's the latest on Mike?
So Mike started cancer treatment yesterday, and then they're going to do the treatment for so many days, and I can't remember how many days he said, and then
5
days.
weeks.
5 weeks. 5 weeks of treatment, then a surgery. So, yeah, so I haven't heard anything this week on how that treatment is going, but it was supposed to start yesterday. All right, Mike, would you close us in prayer?
Father in heaven, it's such an encouragement to see the people that are taking on doing these things themselves. I thank you that we can have a part in getting those things started, and being a part of the building. Thank you